At exactly 2:43 a.m., the emergency siren blared, long, sharp, and unmistakably federal. I jolted upright in bed, heart slamming against my ribs, just in time to see a convoy of unmarked black SUVs tearing down our quiet suburban street. Within seconds, tactical agents in full gear poured out, fanning across lawns, barking into radios, scanning rooftops and driveways. Night vision goggles. M4S. This wasn't a burglary. This was a government operation in full swing. But none of it made sense, until one of the agents pointed directly at the spot where my equipment trailer used to be. Gone. The trailer was gone. Not just any trailer. My trailer, the one I had welded shut, reinforced with biometric locks, and parked precisely where the Department of Homeland Security had instructed me. It contained dozens of sensor arrays, aerial drones, and hard drives loaded with weeks of reconnaissance on a suspected smuggling ring operating out of our region. I stumbled outside in bare feet and a t-shirt, still trying to process what I was seeing. A single orange HOA violation flag was fluttering where the trailer had once stood. Duct taped to the curb. A note flapped beneath it, hand-scrawled in bold marker. Unauthorized structure. Removed by HOA for community safety. I felt my stomach drop through the earth. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. Karen Eastbrook. President of our local HOA. Queen of the Coven. She once fined my neighbor for planting non-native daisies. And now she just towed away a federal surveillance trailer. Like it was a trash can left too close to the sidewalk. I turned to see two agents approaching me, stone-faced. "Sir," the taller one said, "we need to know exactly when the asset was moved. And who authorized the relocation." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How the hell do you explain to the Department of Homeland Security that your neighbor, armed with nothing more than a clipboard and a superiority complex, just walked off with their classified surveillance rig? And worse, she probably thought she was doing the neighborhood a favor. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. This was going to be war. 3 months before the sirens, before the agents, before the community turned into a federal crime scene, I was just a man trying to disappear into normal life. After 15 years in the Army and another 5 bouncing between government contracts and private security gigs, I'd finally had enough. I wanted out of the rotating deployments, out of the gray areas, out of the noise. I wanted a house with a porch, a garage I could work in, and a place where my dog could run free without tripping over tripwires. So when I found a quiet listing in a low-drama suburban cul-de-sac called Foxwood Ridge, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The ad even boasted, "Award-winning community. No nonsense. Beautiful yards. Friendly faces." They forgot to mention Karen Eastbrook. The day I moved in, she was already on my driveway before the movers had even unloaded my mattress. Blonde bob. Clipboard. Cardigan that screamed power trip. "Hello, I'm Karen," she said with a frozen smile. "HOA president. You must be Mr. Blake." "Just Blake," I replied, trying to keep it friendly. Her eyes slid past me to the black trailer being lowered from the flatbed. It was sleek, matte, military grade, custom fitted with modular lock plates and sensor mounts. To the untrained eye, maybe it looked like a mobile command center. Which, in a way, it was. Her mouth twisted. "That's a rather aggressive-looking structure." "It's just a trailer," I said. "Parked temporarily. I have clearance." "Clearance?" She echoed like I'd said a dirty word. "This neighborhood follows strict visual compliance standards. I'll need to see documentation." I tried to be patient. "It's been cleared with the proper authorities. I can't discuss the details." And that was the moment I saw it, that flicker in her eyes. The kind that doesn't mean curiosity. It means control. She didn't care who I was or why I was here. She just didn't like not being in charge. From that point on, it was like living under a magnifying glass. She filed her first complaint within 48 hours. "Trailer exceeds visual conformity limits." The next week, another. "Vehicle suspected of being unregistered." Then she cited me for non-decorative window tint on my Jeep. I'm not even sure that's a thing. The Jeep. Right. Let's talk about the Jeep. It was my pride and joy. Retired military frame, reinforced bumpers, low-profile paint, and equipped with dual-camera modules. A few months before I moved, I'd been approached by a joint task force that needed discreet surveillance in residential zones. They needed a trusted civilian who wouldn't draw attention. Someone who knew the drill but could blend in. That's where I came in. And the Jeep, parked out front like a prop from an action movie, was the perfect cover. They gave me strict instructions. Keep it in plain view but locked down. Rotate its position every few days. Don't open the trailer or touch the gear. And never move it without notice. The Jeep and trailer formed a passive surveillance hub, capturing data from a local drug ring suspected of using delivery vans to move product between quiet suburbs like ours. I was doing my job. Quietly. Respectfully. But to Karen, it was an eyesore. A violation. A challenge to her authority. I tried to explain. Repeatedly. I even told her, in vague terms, that I was working on a law enforcement contract and that the equipment was off-limits. She didn't care. She doubled down. Threatened citations. Harassed the mailman. Even walked around with a tape measure, claiming my Jeep was too tall for the driveway sight line. And then, when passive aggression failed, she called a tow company. The first one refused when I showed them the DHS sticker discreetly tucked on the axle. The second never even showed up. But that wasn't the end of it. One Thursday afternoon, while I was out on a hardware run, she acted. Later, my neighbor told me she came out of her garage with bolt cutters like she was about to liberate Paris. She snipped the padlock clean off the trailer's tow hitch and flagged down some shady flatbed truck that wasn't even city licensed. By the time I got home, the trailer and Jeep were gone. In their place, a traffic cone, an HOA violation flag, and a Karen-sized mess I didn't yet realize was about to become a national incident. I barely had time to absorb the fact that both my Jeep and trailer were missing before Rick, my neighbor from 2 doors down, called out to me from his porch. "You might want to see this," he said, holding up his phone with a smirk that could melt steel. Rick was retired Air Force and lived on that porch like it was a command post. His ring cam captured just about everything that happened on our block, and apparently it had just captured a felony in progress. I walked over. Rick hit play. There she was. Karen. Dressed in her usual pastel HOA armor, striding across my driveway with a pair of bolt cutters like she was about to open a vault. She squatted down, examined the lock, gave a little theatrical sigh, and snapped it clean off. Then she looked straight into the camera, smiled, and said, "One less piece of junk cluttering up our community." Seconds later, a rusty tow truck pulled up. No logos. No city tags. Just some guy in cargo shorts and flip-flops who didn't even bother checking registration. Together, they hauled away the trailer and the Jeep like it was a busted trampoline someone left on the curb. I stared at the screen. My jaw was clenched so tight I could hear my molars grinding. Rick glanced at me. "I hope you have friends in high places." I did. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with a call from Agent Reena Patel, the liaison from the Joint Task Force. I told her everything, about Karen, the trailer, the towing, the footage. I barely finished the sentence before she cut me off. "We're en route. Do not speak to anyone else. We'll handle it." And they did. Hard. By sundown, 3 black government SUVs were parked in front of my house, and half the block was peeking through their blinds like it was a live episode of Homeland. I handed over Rick's video, the violation note Karen left, and every HOA citation she'd spammed me with over the past few weeks. The moment Patel saw Karen's smirking face on that ring footage, she muttered, "Jesus Christ," and immediately got on the radio. They weren't just worried about missing equipment. They were furious. Because that trailer? It wasn't just a hub. It contained encrypted drives, long-range drone feeds, and a remote access terminal to a broader database, one that linked active surveillance nodes across 3 counties. And Karen had just had it towed by a guy in flip-flops. Worse, the trailer hadn't turned up at any local tow lot. They checked. Fast. That meant it had been taken somewhere private off the grid. And someone, Karen, was holding on to it. So they escalated. DHS issued an emergency trace on the GPS unit buried in the Jeep's bumper. It pinged once, briefly, from somewhere behind the HOA maintenance shed. And then, silence. Signal lost. The agents loaded up fast, and I wasn't about to stay behind. Patel waved me into the back seat of her SUV without even asking. We took off, headlights off, speeding past rows of perfectly trimmed hedges and identical beige garages, until we reached the old utility shed behind the tennis courts, technically HOA property, but long forgotten by most. Except Karen. The agents pried open the rusted gate and slipped inside. That's when we saw it. A chain-link fence surrounded a dirt clearing littered with trash, cones, and a few other battered vehicles. A broken lawn tractor. A dented minivan. And there, slumped crookedly behind a pile of rotting mulch, was my Jeep. Scratched. Covered in dirt. Back tire flat. The surveillance trailer sat beside it, rear door hanging open like a crime scene. I rushed forward. One of the agents stopped me just short. "Don't touch anything," he said. "It's already been tampered with." And it had. The biometric lock had been smashed off. The interior was ransacked. Wires yanked. Cameras broken. A side panel was peeled back like someone tried to crowbar their way inside. The encrypted hard drives? Gone. Or worse, opened. The entire surveillance array, weeks of investigation, compromised. Agent Patel stood in stunned silence before turning to her team. "Secure this location. Nobody leaves. We treat this like a hostile breach." Then she turned to me. "Your neighbor didn't just move a trailer," she said grimly. "She dismantled a federal surveillance unit. She tampered with classified systems. And she might have just blown a multi-state investigation wide open." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was a full-blown federal incident. And Karen? Karen had no idea what she'd done. Yet. We hadn't even finished sealing off the makeshift impound lot behind the HOA maintenance shed when the sound of heels on gravel echoed through the trees. Karen Eastbrook. Red blazer. Lipstick like war paint. Clipboard in hand like it was a royal decree. She strutted into the scene like she was about to host a community picnic. "Oh! You found it!" she chirped, spotting the Jeep and trailer. "I was just about to notify you. I figured you'd want your equipment back." The way she said equipment, like she was describing a moldy mattress, made my fists clench. Agent Patel stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is an active federal investigation site. I need you to step away from the vehicle." Karen blinked, visibly confused by the tone. "Excuse me? I'm the HOA president. I have full authority to manage non-compliant items left on neighborhood property. You removed federal surveillance property from an ongoing operation," Patel snapped. "Do you understand how serious that is?" Karen's mouth twitched. "That trailer was abandoned. It had a lock on it. I assumed it was unauthorized. I did the neighborhood a favor." Patel stepped aside and motioned to a nearby officer. "Escort her back to her residence. She's not to leave the premises without written authorization. We'll be speaking again, soon." Karen tried to protest, but the officer was already guiding her away, gently but firmly. Even then, she couldn't resist tossing out one last line. "Y'all should be thanking me for keeping the streets clean." She had no idea. Later that night, a notice was taped to every mailbox in Foxwood Ridge. Emergency HOA meeting. Friday, 6 p.m. Community Center. Attendance strongly encouraged. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Karen had called the meeting herself. To defend herself. She still believed she could spin this into a misunderstanding. That somehow, with enough sugar-coated explanations and bureaucratic doublespeak, she could walk away clean. She hadn't seen what was coming. I arrived early. So did Rick. So did Patel and 2 federal observers in plain clothes. The board sat at their usual long table looking tense and exhausted. The room buzzed like a power line. More than 60 residents showed up, almost triple the usual turnout. Karen strolled in 15 minutes late, like a queen arriving at her coronation. She was all smiles. She tapped the microphone twice, adjusted her papers, and began. "Good evening, neighbors," she began, her voice oozing authority. "I'd like to clear up some unfortunate misunderstandings about the events earlier this week." She launched into a speech that sounded like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. Words like visual safety, community standards, and ambiguous ownership peppered her monologue. She claimed she'd received multiple complaints about the trailer and had acted to protect the integrity of the neighborhood's aesthetics. She said the federal agents had failed to label the equipment properly, and that any confusion was on their part. That's when I stood up. "Really?" I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the buzz. "Because I seem to remember you smiling at the camera while cutting the lock." Gasps scattered across the room. Karen's smile faltered. I turned to the IT guy at the back of the room. He'd already set up the projector at my request. "Play it," I said. The screen lit up. The room fell silent. First, the Ring camera footage. Karen strutting up the driveway, bolt cutters in hand. Her slicing through the lock. Her grinning at the camera. Her gesturing to the tow truck like she was waving off trash collection. Next, the screenshots. Karen's Facebook post, boasting about taking initiative. A neighborhood group thread where she mocked military cosplay weirdos. And finally, the piece de resistance, her own comment. "Sometimes you have to break the rules to keep the streets clean." The room broke into murmurs. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." A woman in the back crossed her arms and whispered, "I knew it." Karen's face turned the color of her blazer. I was misled about the nature of the vehicle," she stammered. "I didn't know it was part of a surveillance operation. The bylaws clearly give me authority to act in the community's best interest." "No, they don't," a voice cut in from the side of the room. It was Agent Patel. She stepped forward, calm and sharp as a scalpel. "We've reviewed your HOA charter. Not only did you bypass board procedure, you hired an unlicensed tow service, relocated federal property to an unauthorized location, and tampered with surveillance gear. That's obstruction. And possibly embezzlement." Karen opened her mouth, but Patel wasn't finished. "You operated what amounts to an illegal impound lot behind community property, without board knowledge. You destroyed sensitive equipment and compromised an active investigation. That's not neighborhood leadership. That's reckless endangerment." The room went dead silent. Greg, one of the board members, coughed awkwardly and stood. "I'd like to make a motion," he said, "to suspend Karen Eastbrook from her position as HOA president, pending legal review and internal investigation." "Seconded," came another voice. "All in favor?" he asked. The entire board raised their hands. So did half the room. Karen stood frozen, clutching her clipboard like a life raft. "You can't do this. I built this HOA. I've kept this community clean for 6 years. And tore it apart in one day," I said. The vote was recorded. The room erupted, not into chaos, but relief. People clapped. Some laughed. Real quick, if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, type the word Karen in the comments. Let's see how many of us have survived something like this. Karen's clipboard slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. For the first time, she looked small. And I knew, standing there among neighbors and agents and silent witnesses to her downfall, that this was just the beginning. Karen didn't show up the next day. Or the day after. Her house remained dark, blinds drawn tight. No walks. No clipboards. No passive-aggressive sticky notes slapped onto mailboxes. For a moment, We thought maybe that was it. But if we'd learned anything, it was this: Karen Eastbrook never goes down quietly. On Monday morning, she reemerged, this time in a wrinkled navy pantsuit, standing outside the county courthouse with a man who looked like he just crawled out of a billboard for personal injury attorneys. Slick back hair. Oversized sunglasses. Loud tie. His name was Cliff Darrington, and he loved microphones almost as much as he loved contingency fees. In front of a cluster of bored reporters and one unfortunate intern holding a foam mic, Cliff announced a press conference. He declared Karen to be the true victim, accusing the police and federal agents of targeting a woman who only sought to beautify her neighborhood. According to him, the trailer was unmarked. The Jeep was militaristic intimidation. And I was complicit in an entrapment scheme to humiliate a respected civic leader. She was never informed of any federal involvement, he said. And my client will be seeking damages for emotional distress, defamation, and career sabotage. I watched the whole circus from Rick's garage, chewing on beef jerky and trying not to throw something at the TV. She really thinks this is going to work? I muttered. Rick cracked open a soda. Nah. But watching her flail is more entertaining than daytime cable. And flail she did. By Tuesday afternoon, Cliff had filed 4 separate lawsuits, one against me, one against the task force, one against the HOA board, and one against the city for failure to protect a civilian administrator from undue public scrutiny. The media didn't bite. But the internet? The internet ate it up. Rick uploaded the original Ring footage to Reddit under r/entitled people with the title HOA Karen Cuts Lock Tows Jeep. Didn't know it was part of a federal op. It hit the front page in under 3 hours. From there, it exploded. TikTokers added dramatic voiceovers to Karen's lines. Someone remixed her "Keeping the Streets Clean" comment into a trap beat. Twitter/X users dubbed her the HOA Queen of Dumb Decisions. A parody account called A Clipboard Karen gained 80K followers in 2 days, tweeting fictional HOA citations like Violation number 47, You're welcome mat is not beige. And the Jeep? The Jeep became a symbol. A user named @TacOpsEnthusiast launched a GoFundMe titled Save the Surveillance Jeep, with the joke goal of raising $500 for some touch-up paint and federal-grade attitude. It raised $14,000 in 36 hours. I used part of it to fix the Jeep's busted camera array, but I left the scratches on the bumper. Felt like battle scars. Some neighbors started calling it the watchdog. Someone taped a community defender decal across the back. Kids took selfies in front of it like it was a movie prop. If this ending made you smile, hit that like button so more people can enjoy this win. Karen, meanwhile, was learning the hard way that going viral isn't always a win. Her lawsuits began to fall apart almost immediately. The judge tossed her claim against the task force after reviewing the surveillance damage report. The city dismissed her complaint as without standing. And my own case? The clerk didn't even finish reading the filing before stamping it denied. But the coup de grace came when federal investigators subpoenaed HOA financial records and discovered that Karen had quietly funneled community funds to cover the towing fees, without approval or record. That turned the reckless HOA president headline into a possible embezzlement investigation. Greg, now acting president, issued a formal apology to residents and began the process of drafting a total overhaul of the HOA charter. At the next board meeting, he formally dissolved Karen's infamous Aesthetic Standards Committee. Someone brought cupcakes. Rick live-streamed the whole thing with the caption, "The HOA strikes back, against itself." I couldn't believe it. Somehow, something as stupid as a trailer and a clipboard war had morphed into national catharsis. And in the middle of it all, scratched, dusty, and proud, sat my Jeep. Still parked in front of my house. Still watching. The morning Karen was arrested, the neighborhood felt still. Not quiet in the usual way. Not peaceful. But held breath still. Then the black SUVs rolled in. 2 federal marshals, a plainclothes officer from the task force, and a woman from the DA's office stepped out like characters from a crime drama. They moved quickly, knocking once on Karen's front door, then waiting. No answer. A locksmith arrived. The door opened. Karen emerged 5 minutes later, bleary-eyed, clutching a folder and still wearing the same wrinkled blazer from her press conference. Her mouth opened to protest, but no sound came out. No crowd, no fans, just neighbors watching silently from porches and windows as she was placed into handcuffs. Charges included destruction of federal property, obstruction of a criminal investigation, unauthorized towing operation, and misappropriation of HOA funds. By the time the black SUVs pulled away, no one clapped. No one jeered. It was over. But the real transformation had only just begun. Within days, Greg announced an emergency vote, dissolved the HOA entirely. He held an open forum under a string of lights in the cul-de-sac. No clipboards, no podiums, no rules about lawn color. Just neighbors talking like humans. The vote passed unanimously. No more Karen. No more citations. No more visual compliance. Checklists. Instead, we planted flowers. Real flowers. Not HOA-approved drought-resistant box shrubs. Bright, colorful, glorious chaos. Kids chalked murals on sidewalks. Someone put up a birdbath that had been banned for reflectivity. Another neighbor built a bench under the oak tree Karen once tried to have removed for root intrusion. Foxwood Ridge was free. And then, there was the garage. The old utility shed, Karen's secret impound lot, had been repossessed by the city during the investigation. But instead of auctioning it off, the task force did something unexpected. They gave it to me. Agent Patel showed up one sunny afternoon with a smile and a manila envelope. "You kept your cool," she said. "You helped us connect the dots. And frankly, we think it's only right that you decide what happens to the place Karen tried to use for control." I stood there speechless, holding the deed to what had once been a symbol of abuse, and was now something far more valuable, a clean slate. We cleaned it out. Rick donated tools. Greg brought in an old workbench. Teenagers helped paint the walls. We added a sign out front that read, "The garage, built by the community, for the community." Anyone could use it. No forms. No approvals. Just neighbors helping neighbors. And to celebrate, we threw a parade. It wasn't official, just a slow, honking procession of jeeps, trucks, bikes, and lawn chairs with wheels. Veterans rolled through with flags waving. Kids sat in the backs of pickup beds tossing candy. Rick rode shotgun in a golf cart wearing aviators and a tactical vest he absolutely did not earn. And leading the parade? My Jeep. Now restored, polished, and bearing a new decal across the hood. Neighborhood watchdog. The final touch came that evening, when the neighborhood gathered around my front yard. Greg stepped forward, grinning like a kid about to unwrap a birthday gift. He held a custom-forged metal sign in his hands. We bolted it into the curb, just under the Jeep's bumper. It read, "Reserved for tactical eyesore." Everyone laughed. Someone cheered. Someone else popped open a bottle of sparkling cider. And as I stood there, surrounded by a group of people who had once lived in fear of one woman's clipboard, I realized something. This place didn't just survive Karen. It grew from her downfall. She had tried to control everything, down to mailbox color and grass length. But in the end, she only proved that real community doesn't come from rules. It comes from respect. Karen never returned. She sold her house quietly, through an attorney. Last I heard, she was trying to start over in a gated community downstate. God help them. But here? We'd found something better. Not just freedom, but each other. And every time I start that Jeep, hear the purr of the engine and feel the quiet strength in the steering wheel, I'm reminded. What started with a lock-cutting HOA president turned into something much more. Want more HOA Karen stories like this one? Tap subscribe and come back tomorrow for another revenge story. A reminder that entitlement falls fast, but neighbors who stand together? That's power you can't tow away. At its core, this story isn't just about a stolen Jeep or a rogue HOA president, it's about what happens when control replaces compassion. Karen believed that authority gave her the right to act without consequence. But in doing so, she forgot the most important principle of leadership: respect is earned, not enforced. The lesson here is simple, yet profound: abusing power, even in small, everyday ways, eventually collapses under its own weight. It's a reminder that when people come together, when neighbors support each other and stand up to injustice, no matter how petty or powerful, it creates a ripple far stronger than any rulebook. For anyone who's ever felt silenced by bureaucracy or bullied by someone hiding behind a title, let this story be your proof. Community thrives not because of control, but because of connection. In the end, it wasn't the agents, the lawsuits, or the Jeep that restored peace, it was the people. Regular folks. Taking back their neighborhood. One choice at a time.